My name is Kester Nucum, and on behalf of the Rural Reimagined Club, I would like to welcome you all to the Rural Journey Speaker Series. Established in March of 2019, Rural Reimagined is Tennessee Tech's grand challenge initiative to unite students, faculty, and community members to support and transfer rural communities through research, civic engagement, service learning, and entrepreneurship. The Rural Reimagined Club is the premier student organization under Tennessee Tech, under the Grand Challenge, to bring all disciplines together and to build awareness and advocacy for rural communities. The club has served as a platform for students to learn about the issues that face rural communities and opportunities to serve rural areas that involve their career or personal interests. The Rural Journey Speaker Series, created in fall of 2020, discusses cross-disciplinary issues in rural Tennessee. We have had media personalities, K-12 educators, and student leaders share their stories of how they became advocates for their local rural communities. So we are excited to continue the Rural Journey Speaker Series in 2021, and it is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. We had a second speaker lined up, but she, unfortunately, I think isn't here today. So I'd like to introduce Hailey Updike. She is currently a sophomore human ecology major here at Tech, who is not only researching, but advocating for foster care education as well as family consumer sciences education. So I'm just gonna take it off to Hailey and just ask you, first of all, what is your rural journey?
I'm really happy to be here today. I guess, everything starts with the childhood. So as I was growing up, I moved from just a bunch of small towns, very little, and I kept going to different schools, meeting new people, and my parents always played an active role in this community. So my dad would go to these basketball games and meet the kids there. My mom was a teacher and she would meet the kids and their families. And at that point, I knew that not everyone got to grow up in the same situation I did. And that's when I first really became aware of that sort of situation. But in middle school, my oldest sister, Savannah, we adopted her into our family. She, I don't want to go into too much detail because that's her story and her privacy there. But we adopted her into our family, and she just has played a big role in our lives ever since then. And then when I first started pursuing family and consumer sciences education, we call it FACS, it's just shorter, but started when I got to high school. So I had friends who would come to me and they were desperately trying to move out of their houses. As 17 and 18-year-olds, they wanted to move out because they said they weren't in the best living situations, or they weren't just, their families weren't treating them as well as they could have been. And they came to me with these grocery lists of things they needed to buy to move out of their houses. And on these lists, they had snack cakes and makeup and jewelry, and they didn't have foods that would be able to be preserved for a long time. They didn't have like canned foods or pastas or fruits and vegetables, just things that are part of an essential diet. And no cleaning supplies. They didn't plan on cleaning the house or anything, no self-care supplies, toothbrush, toothpaste. And I asked them about it, and they said they weren't planning on bringing any of this stuff. And that's when it sort of hit me. People need to be educated about how to live in an adult world, especially people who don't come from the most stable backgrounds and families that don't educate them as well as they could be educated. So that's really when I first realized that things like foster care education for youth who were aging out of the system is vital for just regular human functioning. And then I got to Tech and started studying, doing some research, and now I'm here.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story, Hailey. And I know that we're very, very lucky to have you here at Tech. And so, would you like to share a little bit about, what you do here at Tech with, your research and in foster care advocacy and foster care education, as well as you're trying to promote FCS to your fellows, I would say, students and people in the community?
Sure. So FCS is really overlooked. When people think about family and consumer sciences, they think of the old home ec classes from the 70s, and it's just women's work and it's sewing and doing the dishes. But it has changed so much with all the research that's been going on. Family and consumer sciences is just essentially human necessity, things that when people say, I wish they taught this in high school, I wish they taught us how to do our taxes in high school or how to do things properly, that's what family and consumer sciences education is for. So you've got personal finance, you've got sanitation and self-care and just everything you wish you were taught. That's what Fax Ed is. But the thing is, people still think it's all about sewing and they don't want to commit to the class. So my goal, obviously, is to raise awareness of that those resources are still there. And in some communities, they're not. They're not being provided those classes and that education, and they're not even being given the chance to receive it. So part of my goal as a student at Tech is to raise awareness of why Fax Ed is so important to just human development in general. It's essential to surviving.
Oh, yes, for sure. Have you seen kind of like, since Tech is located in a very rural region, and I don't know if you're from a rural community or not, but have you seen, I would say not just, I wouldn't say differences, but just like what have you seen is the culture surrounding or the mindset surrounding, family consumer sciences in rural areas? Like, what are the challenges or difficulties that you have seen firsthand in trying to promote that discipline or those sciences to students?
Well, in my first town, I guess, where my sister Savannah, that's where she grew up as well. And so the first town I ever lived in was definitely children should be seen and not heard. It was very football, They didn't really place much importance on things like sciences and English. And so Fax was at the very bottom of the totem pole there. Of course, I was young. I didn't know much about Fax education in general. But comparing that place to Tech, I've noticed Tech is making a lot of effort to provide these types of resources. Like this year, I believe, is when it launched. You've got their classes like Self-Care 101 and Personal Finance, Time Management, and that's the sort of thing Fax is sort of trying to do. And it's at a very small scale, but you can tell the heart is there and that the desire to continue this education is there. And the surrounding community is not as on board with FCS education. Recently, some of it was defunded, unfortunately, but here at Tech, we're trying to still advocate for the importance of FCS education and show that your students should be taking this course, especially if they grow up in unstable homes. And I'm going to pull out some statistics here. Where I come from, or where I came from, and my sister, nearly 80% of all children there were raised by their grandparents or some other type of guardian. They weren't raised by their parents. And something like family and consumer sciences education that helps with healthy communication and just taking care of yourself, building relationships, would really be essential, life-changing even. It would be vital in a community like that.
Definitely. I know that a lot of classes such as like for example, I know my personal experience, it's oftentimes those classes that really are not really curriculum based in a sense, but more, FCS based or life lessons based that really make an impact on you. So definitely that's, illustrates the importance of family and consumer sciences, not only in rural areas, but just, in a lot of schools in general.
Yeah. Yeah, most people don't know this, but there are standards and curriculum for FACS, but FACS teachers have a lot of freedom because they can use life experiences. Like instead of sitting in a math class and doing equations and problems from a textbook, they can be like, okay, so you guys are playing a two-family household who has to budget for this much, and you have to do this and this, and it really just helps you learn the skills in a more effective way. I mean, research has shown us that when education is associated with something meaningful, you're more likely to retain it. So that's why people who have FACS classes are more likely to remember what they learned.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, for sure. Believe me, there's some times where I'm just like, woo, all about my engineering STEM classes, but it's truly those, life lessons that stay with you forever. I just curious, what inspired you to go into family consumer sciences? Later on, I would love to talk to you about, your foster care research and stuff like that. But what did inspire you to, go into this field and, pursue a degree here in the human ecology at Tennessee Tech?
Well, I'd have to say it was my 4-H extension agent. She played a really big role in exposing me to the world of what FACS is. And then as I grew, I was allowed to work alongside her with some things, just in volunteer positions, helping with the local children in the schools or during summer camps or whatever. And I said to her one day, I would love to do what you do. I'd love to make an impact in my community like you do. And she told me that what I needed to do was get a FACS education degree. And so I did some research. I was like, I've never even heard of that. I didn't know I could get a degree in that. And I did some research. I took some classes at my high school. And then I knew this is what I want to do. I want to be able to help everyone in my community no matter what.
Oh, definitely. That's definitely very, very inspiring, and I'm very glad that you found, this is something that you want to do. So what do you imagine yourself going after college to use, like how to use all those like skills and lessons that you've learned growing up and here at Tech? Like what do you envision yourself doing post college?
Well, this is actually a really great way to tie in foster care. So I would like to be an extension agent, and in that position, I would be able to teach foster parents, get them their certifications to become foster parents, do that sort of thing, and also teach parents who are in line to get the custody back of their children. They are in most states they're required to take some level of parenting classes. So I'd like to help lead those parenting classes and just reunite families, get families into good communications and just good functioning situations. And because I'm sure you can tell this, but family is my life. I love my family and I love seeing others with their families. So I know the definition of family changes, especially in FACS. Trying to define family is something really hard. Oh, I'm so sorry. it's really hard because it does change, because anyone, like anyone you provide for financially or emotionally, just they become your family. And so it's, I'd like to help facilitate building those good family relationships.
Definitely. I know you'll do a very great job with that once you go out of college, and I know you're already doing such a great job trying to help, instill that awareness and promote that already through the speaker series and through other ways right now. And so I guess we're going to segue into, your foster care research. Could you shed a little bit light about not only, I guess, first of all, how did you get into this specific, research topic? Like, I know, like, we have some students here that are, I know we are both honors engaged in fellowships. We have Dr. Barnes, the director of the honors program here at Tech, and we have this. And so essentially, we're trying to promote, research, instill research and civic engagement, starting through our freshman year. So, how did foster care education become your, research and civic engagement advocacy issue?
Well, when I started researching Fax Ed, I noticed there was a lot to pick through. So then I was like, well, let's talk about foster care. And most of the research was about young children. I had to search for hours to find something about teens and people who are about to age out. So people who used to be in the foster care system are known as former foster youth. And so there was really very little data about former foster youth. And that concerned me because young childhood development is very important. I'm not saying that it's not, because obviously we wouldn't have done this much research if it wasn't important. But I think it's important too to remember that these children who are about to be adults and about to have to live on their own, once they age out, they don't have anyone to depend on. They don't have their birth family, they don't have any of their foster families. And lots of times what happens is moving from home to home means that they aren't getting the education they need. So, 40 to 50% of youth after aging out end up homeless within the first year of aging out because they just don't have anyone to rely on. And that broke my heart. It just devastated me because from what I could see, there wasn't anything to help them. There wasn't anything to help educate them. And that's when I knew this is what I have to do. I have to figure out what this is.
Could you shed a little bit more light on the, what a lot of the foster care system, and especially in a lot of rural areas? I know that that's something, a lot of people want to encourage is, I think adoption and foster care are different. Like that's something that I know I still need which is why I'm going to turn it over to you, or those who may not be familiar with how, I guess, foster care works, or how the system, what are the, I'm trying to think of how to say, what are ways that we could see improvements throughout the next few years and try to encourage more people not only to help those in the system, if that's a right way of phrasing it.
Yeah, you're good. So, well, adoption and foster care are different, but lots of times parents will go into foster care with adoption in mind. So what happens during foster care is the parents of the children need a little extra help, and they're not fully prepared to take on the responsibility of raising their child yet. So lots of times babies born with NAS will be taken away. That's neonatal alcohol syndrome. So babies born with addictions are taken away until the parents can get back on their feet. Children in abusive homes or neglected homes, they will get taken away and put into the foster care system. And this is just done to protect the children and to allow the parents to seek the help they need and just get back on their feet until they're ready to have their families again. Unfortunately, this doesn't always happen. Children aren't always permitted to go back to their families, which is devastating, but that's where foster families play a big role. So if a child grows up with a foster family, that family has the opportunity to adopt them and to keep the child permanently. And so that's just one of the ways to build family. What was the second part of the question? I'm sorry.
I would say, like, what are some, I guess the second part, or like another, like, facet to that question is like, what are some, I guess, current shortcomings, especially within, or I wouldn't say issues that the foster care system faces, that you are currently, researching and studying and hopefully wanting to shed light and, enact change to help fix some of the issues that, the current system faces.
I've noticed foster parents are required to take a certain level of classes before they can become certified parents. But I've noticed that in many communities where foster care is implemented, the nearest education centers, the nearest place where you can be taught and have those classes is nearly 2 to 3 hours away. And that presents a problem because it motivates fewer people to become foster parents in that area. And when that happens, children must be moved from their hometown where they grew up, from their schools, to a whole nother location. And that can be stressful. Another problem I've noticed is that occasionally the foster education system for parents is not as thorough as it could be. It focuses a lot on young children and youth, like ages 10 and under. But when it comes to teenagers and young adults, it's severely lacking. It needs a lot of work and improvement in this area and probably in most other areas too, because people just don't think about it because they're like, my teenagers grew up and they're doing fine, so this teenager will be fine too. But you have to understand, the older that foster youth get, usually the more unstable. It's not always the case, but it's usually the more unstable homes they grow up in because people just, it's a sad fact, but most people don't want to take care of a teenager. So they're often not able to stay in the same home for extended periods of time.
Right. Have you had any, like, I guess, personal interactions with the system itself, with, the foster care system itself? Like, have you, like, how do you know personally anyone who's been, I wouldn't say, I'm trying to word it in a right way, just because I know this is a very sensitive topic to obviously many people. But what are your personal, like, interactions with the system? Like, just you not only researching, reading all these, like, papers and academic papers and all these, like, summaries, but just your personal interactions with people you've known who either gone through the system or who are foster care parents, or etc.
I have had some conversations with some current foster parents who are currently trying to adopt, and that stuff is kind of sensitive, so I can't go into a bunch of detail about that. But, I would often just watch their child because they had to travel so far to get the classes they needed. So I had to do some babysitting. It happened a lot in my hometown. And then recently, as I've done research with some professors, again, I can't really talk about the system itself, but she works, and I've talked to her about her experiences in foster parent education, especially with NAS. That's her focus. And she said there's just not enough education for it. Oftentimes there aren't any classes for NAS babies and how to soothe them and comfort them after they're born. But that's foster parents will receive their child and will not know what to do because they've never been told. Sometimes they don't even know that their baby has any issues. And it's a tough, I guess it's a tough battle, honestly. Not to call it that, but it's not an easy thing to go through. Yeah.
All right. I would like to, and definitely it's very, I wouldn't say very good that you're, doing the research, or, promoting awareness. So what do you think? So for the audience members, before we move on, we're going to have a question and answer part at the end. So if you could please think about, and if you could type your questions in the chat, I will ask them. I'll ask them, and Hailey will be happy to answer them, and we'll just keep on, answering. She'll keep on answering questions as time permits. So, but moving on to your research, and I guess like the research. The research, like you going through all the research process and everything. What have you seen that are the next steps that you are wanting to do? Like, so now you've seen, you've talked with a lot of people who are, foster care parents. You've learned about how the system works. What are what are you wanting to do to help, I guess, bring that awareness or bring that education to those who may not be familiar with how foster care works, or the shortcomings that the system may encounter?
Some things are, I'm sure you understand, it's very closely knit and very closely kept under wraps. And so some things I will not be able to do until I get into the system. But as of right now, I'm working on sort of something similar to what the school is running with the classes on finance and time management, but at a lower level for high school students. So in my research, I've found in some communities that have a high concentration of foster youth who are about to age out of the system, they've started programs like DC FYI, that's the DC Family and Youth Initiative. And essentially what it is, it recruits adults to come and mentor 16, 17, 18-year-olds and sort of help them, oh, you need to learn about financing, here you go, you need to learn about interpersonal communication, yeah, that's cool. It just helps them develop relationships. So I'd like to sort of get something like that started here at Tech for the students to be able to mentor local students. It would be difficult because everyone would have to run background checks and things, so it's definitely a long-term process. But that's currently what I'm doing. I'm so sorry. I'm just stumbling over my words right now. In regards to raising awareness, I'm just continuing research at this point. I don't really know how I would keep promoting the idea. Obviously, I feel very strongly about it, so I'd like to team up with some of my professors and get fax ed reinstated in some places, but that's a long road as well. It's a long road. We just got to go through it.
Oh yeah, so we already have one question, by the way, Hailey. So the question is, earlier you mentioned funding being cut. What other kind of large-scale barriers / conflicts have you witnessed, and what strategies are being used to get through them?
That is a very good question. I think, honestly, this is going to sound silly, but one of the largest barriers is communication. Most people don't take classes. Extension offers classes on these things. Most people don't take them because they don't know that they exist. And that's definitely one of the biggest barriers. Some of the ways they're being fixed, There's a few extension agents I'm in contact with, like Crystal Blankenship. She was my extension agent. She is working on social media targeted towards younger individuals. So just very quick, short little video lessons like, hey, we're going to teach you how to do this in 1 minute. And so it's just a very brief overview and then expanding on lessons and availability. I also think, well, communication is just a big barrier. Uh, that's as far as I can see. Communication and just availability. Lots of there's more foster youth than there are foster parents, and I don't really know how they're trying to fix it because you have to cater to an individual want and an individual need, and so that type of thing can just be really difficult to initiate.
Right. Well, thanks so much for answering that question. If anyone else has any questions, please feel free to, drop them in the chat. But I do have another question just for, me and you. Could you shed light also on what the UT Extension agencies are, doing, not just in family consumer sciences, education, etc., since I know that's been a very influential force in your upbringing. And I know back home where I live, Paris, we have one, but I wasn't as involved with the extension agencies as much. So could you shed some light on, share more about what the extensions do and, how it's also impacted you as well?
Sure. So Extension's job is to play a large role in the community. So normally what they do every year or so, they'll run an interest survey, which is basically what kind of classes are you guys looking for? What kind of things do you need to learn? So in my experience with Extension, we have a lot of elders and older citizens in the community. So lots of their classes are based on avoiding fall risks and how to take care of yourself, and just they're more geared towards the aging community. However, they still do offer classes about agriculture, like growing your garden from home and canning foods and taking care of animals. I'm sure if any of you have had any 4-H experience, you know that agriculture does play a large role in what 4-H and Extension does. But beyond that, it really is community-based. So currently, it might not be great if you're in a college community, you probably don't receive that survey, but they do still cater to the citizens of Cookeville. So if there's a large population that needs a certain thing, they'll try to implement it. Like here, nutrition is a very big deal. The homeless population here is large, and nutrition is a big issue among them. So the Cookeville's extension is focused primarily on nutrition.
I know that's something, as I've talked with some, or talked with some human ecology majors, like dietetics, is that how it's pronounced, or like nutritional education and just health education in general is something that many rural communities I know aren't as very well equipped with. So trying to, bring that to this community, that's something very laudable that, the UT Extension agencies are trying to help, bring. So we have a few questions actually, so I'm gonna go, I guess, in order. So one question asks, one of our audience members says, you were spot on with the life skills gap in those who are aging out of the system. How can this program better prepare those kids to have those skills such as banking, financial, balancing a checkbook, job interview skills, how to function in work and social environment, etc.?
I really do think it's a valuable program because, for instance, let's say you're 18 years old. You are moving into your first apartment and you have $300 cash to your name. Cash obviously is not the most reliable thing, and you don't know how to open a checking account. You don't know the requirements behind it. You don't know about interest rates or the exact name of the law has left me, but the law that protects your money up to $250,000. I don't remember that. You don't know about that, so you just don't open a checking account. Then someone breaks into your apartment and all of your money is gone. Now you have nothing. And so that in itself, that's just one example of how that sort of thing would be helpful. Like just knowing how to go over paperwork. I know that sounds so mundane, but just knowing how to face paperwork and go after all of that is just valuable knowledge that most of us take for granted. Job interview skills, lots of times in tax classes, you will literally simulate job interviews. So you'll learn how to make a resume, you will learn what is business attire, how should you dress, where can you find clothes if you don't have a ton of business attire clothes. And that's also something that DCFYI works on, is just communication with adults, people in figures of authority, I guess. It's just communicating with them and having easier access to that sort of situation. So I do believe it prepares you well if you have a good teacher. There are, of course, situations where your teacher does not care, and unfortunately that happens often. Lots of people don't like school because their teacher is just not enthusiastic. But if you have a good teacher, you should be able to receive all of those things.
Would you say that your family consumer sciences education back in high school has helped you adult here?
Yes. I cannot tell you how many resumes I have written and how many fake checks I have written and how many checkbooks I have balanced. But as intense as it might seem in high school, it's honestly, it helps me do it without even thinking about it now. It's just flies right out.
Yes. So our next question is, for those who are aging out of the foster care, assuming that their privacy is respected, how can we help those students find a college that is right for them and how to make the transition to college life aside from life skills? And have you learned of any innovative approaches to this college transition for those who are aging out?
Foster care and college do not go hand in hand, unfortunately. Most foster youth never pursue a higher education, and that was another thing that hurt my heart, knowing that just because you grew up in a different family, you were already set to not have, you're already set to be behind everyone else, and it's just not fair. I think it would be more valuable to help them, filling out scholarship applications and just having something. What does applying for classes look like? What does attending classes look like? What sort of things do you have to do to maintain your life at school? I think those would be valuable, but most foster youth don't even think of college as being on the table. I personally have not seen any of these. I personally haven't seen any extremely innovative approaches other than mentorships. But most of the time, if foster youth do not get adopted by the time they're 18, they have no way of funding themselves to get through school. And they just don't want to take on that debt. So that's one of the big challenges that the foster community has, is just moving forward.
Right. Speaking of mentorships, what have you, I think we may have already covered this, but how have you seen the importance of that, support, whether it be in school, whether it be a teacher or, if someone at work or in your family? What have you seen, like the importance of that mentorship support for not only foster kids, but just, children and youth in general, especially with, many rural communities facing, a lot of family dynamics, instability, economic instability, poor funding in schools, etc. Could you just expound on that a little bit?
Sure, yeah. So I can personally attest to the value of having a mentor, but it is especially relevant in the life of a foster child because, like I said earlier, when you're moving from home to home, you never see the same person twice. Your teachers change, your classmates change, your parents change, sometimes even your agent changes, and so, or your social worker changes. And so just being in that constant turmoil, having one single person, just one, that is consistent through all the stress in your life is life-changing. It's just, you're able to hold on to someone and complain to them about whatever you want and just confide in them. And that type of experience is so valuable, especially in small rural communities, even if you're not in foster care. It's important for anyone to have these social connections and just have someone they can learn from and reflect with and just have someone to grow with.
Yes. And what would you say is your, personal experience with, a mentor, like especially here on campus or growing up? How has that influenced you?
I know my parents are definitely mentors to me, but I'm going to leave them out of this for right now, just because I'd like to talk about someone who's outside of my family. I mentioned her earlier, Crystal Blankenship, my extension agent. She played such a large role in my childhood. She pushed me to be better when I was nervous for these projects and presentations. She took me by the shoulders and was like, "You're gonna do great. I've seen you do this 100 times. You're gonna do fine." And she just helped encourage me and helped me build my confidence about the things I wasn't sure I could do. And I love her. I still talk to her. I just texted her this morning to tell her about that.
That's awesome. And so, on another personal note, we have another question that says, you mentioned your foster sister, Savannah. How is she today?
Oh, she is great. She's married with 2 beautiful children. I love them both. I spoil them rotten. She kind of set a limit on the things I was allowed to get them for Christmas. So, they just moved to Texas. Her husband joined the Army, so he's doing that, but she's very happy. She keeps in contact with us, and she's doing great.
That's awesome.
I'm really glad she became part of our family.
That's awesome, and she now has a beautiful family. Thanks, especially with all the support and love that you all gave her. So very glad to hear that she's doing very great right now. So we have a couple of other questions. So why have schools in the United States phased out many FCS programs?
Honestly, I think it's because of a lack of education. Most people don't think they're important because they're still stuck thinking that it's just home ec and that it doesn't matter. But as I hope you understand from what I've told you, it's not just that. It's so important for everyone to just get an education. No matter what kind of home you grew up in, it's important for you to be able to learn how to take care of yourself. I don't know why schools have phased it out, but I think it's a combination of a lack of funding and a lack of education.
Definitely. I know with a lot of different, programs, like for example, I, grew up in the music programs up in, back home, and just to see not as much support for me, or thankfully my school had a lot of good music and art support, but other schools did not have that. Or even with STEM, that's something I know that may not have as much support in many schools as, in many schools. So definitely FCS is something that, is also facing that same challenge. But have you seen kind of how would I say it? Have you tried to, how do you think teachers, or I'm trying to figure out where I was going with this question, but how would you see a way for the argument? I know you've already iterated it multiple times throughout this thing, but what would you say is those arguments to get those get those administrators or get those teachers to show that this is something that needs to stay in our schools? Like, what would you, if you were to present something, what would, be that main argument?
Something I've heard many, many times from many frustrated teachers and professors is principals will complain about their students fighting constantly and having fights in the hallway and just not respecting their teachers. And they'll bring up facts and then they're confused. So the common argument is that facts is great in communities with low SES. Often that's usually where it's most highly advocated for, and also where it's most likely to be rejected. So it's sort of a cruel wheel of just situations. But usually the argument is that facts education helps develop social health, mental health, physical health. It's essentially all aspects of human health bundled into one class, plus a few extra things thrown in, so that way you can become a full person. And that's usually the argument that is made. But on the other hand, most people just think their parents can teach them that. They can just learn that at home. So
right.
It's not an easy argument to make because lots of people already have their minds made up about it, unfortunately.
Right. We have a couple more questions for you, Hailey, but you're doing an amazing job, and very thank you that you're here, and thanks for all who are watching this. We're very grateful that you're here, that just by being here, we are all, promoting this discussion of these issues that, rural areas, but not only rural areas, but just like, the foster care system, family consumer sciences, that these disciplines or these systems face. So so we all thank you for coming here. So the penultimate question I have, unless anyone pops in another one before we wrap up, is how can we get former foster youth on campus at Tennessee Tech? Are there specific scholarships available or things we can do to remove those barriers?
I am kind of ashamed to admit it, but I've never actually looked to see if there are scholarships that Tech offers to former foster youth. I know there are some on just scholarships.com. There's a few there that are listed, but I've never looked up Tech specifically. Are there specific scholarships available or things? I think portraying the fact that there is help available and showing that it's accessible and just not an extra. Once you're a student, it's available for you anytime you need it. I think just displaying that fact would be something of a draw to foster youth because, like I said, stability is not a given.
Right.
And being able to secure your own stability and secure yourself as an adult and just get that self-actualization could be a really big boost. I think that would be a good step in the right direction.
Yes, and I know, and Tech definitely has a lot of resources to support not only foster youth, but just students like us who need to adult.
Yes.
Like I'm here right now in an interview room on the 3rd floor of the RUC where I work in the Career Center, which helps with, and I know Hailey has done our career readiness certification, which is a good program for those who haven't heard of it. And the counseling center is just right down the hallway, and Tech offers a lot of services to really, help, especially in this COVID-19 pandemic, to help students really, not find job search or preserve or, like help their mental well-being, stuff like that. I know we have our Fit still open for those who still, want to, work on their physical well-being. I know working out has helped me with my just whole, like life thing in general. So certainly we do have a lot of resources that unfortunately many students are very unaware that they exist. Here's another question. I joined a little late, so if this was covered, I may have missed it, but I'm curious about the unique challenges to foster kids who have medical issues or are medically needy complex. Are there special initiatives that help them or those who care for them?
That is honestly a great question. I'm shocked that I didn't mention it earlier, so thank you for asking that. But that's one of the main problems we've run into, is that foster parents will get the vanilla training, and then they'll get a child that has very specific and complex needs. And that's what turns many people away from foster parenting, is that there's not really that support. And in some large cities, in some large cities, there's a level of support, but my focus has been on rural communities and small towns where the support is almost extinct. It's hard to reach, and just help for the parents and help for the child is just critically lacking. So there are in some places, special initiatives, there should be more of them, but in some places it's just completely lacking.
Well, definitely. So I guess this kind of like ties into our final question for those wrapping up. What are ways that, so with Rural Reimagined being Tech's Grand Challenge initiative that I explained at the beginning of this session for those who were unfamiliar with it, what are ways that students, and not even just students, but anyone who's on this call right now, whether they be a student, faculty member, community member, just anyone, how can they get involved to, be aware of, or help promote family consumer sciences, or just help, or get involved, maybe with the foster care system, or what are just some ways that you think?
I think, first and foremost, it's important to be compassionate, because kids who are in the foster system are often already very defensive, and they don't want to share that life and that experience with anyone. So it's very important to be compassionate and understanding, be open. As far as facts goes, talk to your local extension agency. Having the support there, supporting them, lets them know that there's a higher need for it. And if there's a higher need for it, it'll be more likely to be influenced within the whole community. So just talk to your local extension agents, get involved in community events, and just think about where you would be if you didn't know how to do the things you do every day. Because that's where lots of people are stuck.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Hailey, for coming on to this talk. I know I definitely learned a lot from you, and I'm sure that our audience members definitely learned a lot from you as well. So you're doing amazing things here at Tech, and just remember, everybody, she's a sophomore here, so she's already doing amazing things. So to wrap up this speaker series session, thank you everybody for coming to this Rural Journey speaker series session. It has been a pleasure to not only moderate, but to listen to you as we have one of our local community advocates. And there's already comments rolling in that's praising you, Hailey, already. So
thank you so much for having me. I was really excited to share what I've learned with you guys, just because most people don't know about it. And I just thank you guys for listening and sticking around to raise your awareness.
Sure. So for those in the audience, we will, for anyone who hasn't been watching, who wasn't able to attend, we will hopefully try to get this uploaded online if technology does not, you know, try to, kick me. And so for those for any students right now, as I said, Rural Reimagine is always looking for students to essentially, if you're doing anything that is, has some sort of rural component, whether that be in research, civic engagement, advocacy work, service learning, you are joining Tech's mission, Tech's initiative to help transform rural areas. So our upcoming Rural Reimagine Club meeting is in 2 weeks, which will be which will be February 23rd, so at 11 a.m. And if you please feel free to message me if you are interested in joining our meeting. We will have Dr. Dennis Fenewald, Associate Professor of Agriculture. So same college as Hailey is in the CAHE, to share his story and share his ways of getting involved in the agricultural field. So if you're interested, that'll be 11 a.m. and they'll be via Zoom. So we'd love to have you there. And our next Rural Journey speaker series is Tuesday, March 2nd at 11 a.m. So same time as well. We will have Bruce Allen. He is an innovation fellow from Rockridge Venture Law here in Cookeville. Was a Sparta native. Went to Princeton University and came back to rural, Upper Cumberland to help, to help bring innovation to local businesses and entrepreneurs. So we're very excited to have him as well, and we have an amazing lineup, including two of our two last year's Eagle Works winners, Daniel Hines and Libby Baldwin, on March 30th to speak about their company, Brantley Marie Medical Devices. So more information will be coming up as we go along, but feel free to follow us at TN Tech RRC for the club, or at TN Tech Rural Reimagined on Facebook and Instagram, just for all the updates, rural related or Rural Reimagined Club related. And if you have any questions, feel free to just message me or anything. And thank you all for coming to this amazing speaker series event. Thank you, Hailey, for coming along as well. And we hope that you all were able to take something out of this, and have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Thank you.